Today we're going to talk about music history. Music history is broken down into 5 periods for instrumental music. The first period being Renaissance, dating from 1400s to the 1600s. The next period being Baroque, 1600s to the 1750s. Classical from 1750 to 1820. Romantic from 1820 to 1900. And 20th century from 1900 to the present. Just because these are the dates doesn't mean the period turned in that exact date. There was definitely a transition period between each period of music for about 50 years for some of them. So as we look at composers when they lived and when they died, sometimes of them lived into the next period and some of them died early into a period. So it doesn't necessarily when the composer was born at the style of music they wrote in. The first period of music we're going to look at is the Renaissance period. Renaissance dated from 1400s to the 1600s. Although it really ended around the 1550s in that range when Baroque was starting to take over. Here are some of the main composers for this period of music. Of course, there are many other composers, but we're just listing a few composers. The Renaissance period is very basic. Very few instruments are being played here, and mainly string instruments. Most music we play nowadays does not come from the Renaissance period, but this is the first period of music where instruments did start to perform in. The next period of music is the Baroque period, dating from 1600s to 1750. As we see J.S. Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, he actually died in 1750, which is why the period is listed ended in 1750, since he was such a prolific composer in that period. You can see all the other composers below, but again, this period ended really in the 1720s, but the one person who was still writing in this period was J.S. Bach. He actually had 3 sons who continued to write, but all of them wrote in the classical style of music. In this style, we start getting a touch of what a symphonies are, and we start getting more ensemble music happening. Still no dynamics, very basic 4 dynamics. The dynamic was either loud or soft. There was no crescendos and no anything else involved with this. The next period of music is the classical period, from 1750s to the 1820s. As you can see, I've listed one of J.S. Bach's sons, CPE Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, as a main composer, as he was in the very early classical period. And then you can see, we all know Wolfgang Mozart and Beethoven and Haydn, and then of course Scarlatti. This period of music developed into symphonies. Operas came out of this period of music, and a lot of the things we use today in music, as far as the notation, came out of this period of music. Baroque period was notated with the kind of style we have now, but just very basic. This is when more notation became written out, and people actually wrote music down where it was passed out, as opposed to Baroque, which was just like that one copy and nobody else saw it. And it was really written for the churches. In the classical period, we also had secular music that was written for church and for secular pieces outside of the church. This music saw dynamic changes and really a lot more expression, and the lengths of the pieces, instead of being a couple minutes long, became 20, 30, even an hour in some of the later periods of music. Beethoven actually wrote half classical and half romantic. So we're going to go to the next period of music, which is romantic, going from 1820s to the 1900s. And again, we could actually list Beethoven as a romantic composer as well, because his last 3 to 4 symphonies were considered romantic period. This period, obviously, as romantic, we talk about being very dramatic, very much extreme dynamics. The double forte was written for the first time in this period of music. The triple forte was also written the first time in this music. Triple piano was written in the first time in the romantic period. Symphonies became hours long instead of just being 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Codas stretched on forever. Again, here are some very famous composers. Tchaikovsky, obviously we all know Tchaikovsky and have heard of him, but even many others. The last period of music we're going to talk about is the 20th century music. I see that I didn't write 20th century, but that's what this is. 1900s to the present. All the composers here, and almost we talk about present, even though as we say 20th century music, that's still considered what we're composing nowadays. This period of music will actually be broken down by historians later on, but since we're still in this period of music, it's kind of all looped into one big style: jazz, rock, and of course the classical-ish style of music is still listed in this. So as you can see, um, there are 5 basic periods of music with instrumental background. There is a medieval music, but that was basically all vocal, and that was before the 1400s. And that was basically whatever it was before then, which we don't have much information about. But the 5 periods of music you can see are listed here.